has been criticisms of how aid can be distributed. There has been criticisms on how the refugee protection has been downgraded into border security and border control. And at the same time, on how this one-to-one deal and other types of tools that has been developed through the EU-Turkey statement have moved the externalization to a different level, externalization of migration and asylum policies to a different level. And in a completely complementary side of things was the relations between Turkey and EU. So all these things coming together, this one single statement has been representing quite a lot of academic, scholarly, and policy debate. And today we are going to be looking at this from different angles, but all complementary angles. So before we move on, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, a distinguished academic, Lucia Najslova. And she's going to be talking on trust, belongings, and misunderstandings. She's the chair of the Department of Politics, Anglo-American University in Prague, from Czech Republic. She has very, very recently, it's very, very fresh, a book on Turkey and the European Union, The Politics of Belonging, looking on the Turkey-EU diplomacy, and especially including the 2016 refugee deal and how these disputes come into being. As Deniz Şenol Sert has already commented on it, that it's a brilliant book looking into our understanding of Turkey politics. So I would strongly recommend to acquire one and have a look into it. And the floor is yours, Lucia.
Thank you very much, Başak, for your kind invitation and your kind words. I'm very honored to be with you here today in such a strong panel. And I was asked to make a few philosophical comments to start the debate. So I want to look at the refugee deal as a symptom of wider phenomena in Turkey-EU relations. And I'm not sure that the deal has brought much novelty into the relationship, but what it certainly did is that it exposed problems and opportunities that have been there all along. We could talk about distrust, sense of unfairness, tendency to exploit each other's weaknesses, even curiosity of some trying to find out how much deeper could we go in the divide. But at the same time, those past 5 years have also been a moment of reckoning that some of the divisions that we held to be fixed are less and less obvious, or perhaps more blurred. Now, each time we say EU and Turkey, we are imprecise. Each time we say EU does this, Turkey does that, we are oversimplifying, and we cannot escape that. So I will not escape it in this talk, but I will be coming back to the reference to how imprecise these two words are. There is a plurality of views and actors, both inside the European Union and Turkey. And the refugee deal, of course, did not start this pluralism, but perhaps made it more obvious. Now, governments representing the states, 29 at that time, because the UK was still with us, might have signed the EU-Turkey statement, but even these very same governments have mixed opinions on what to expect and how the deal should be implemented. At the same time, I think it's useful if we think about Turkey-EU relations as several overlapping networks: government, diplomacy, academic networks, civil society coalitions. Contacts between and within these networks of actors have certainly strengthened over the past few years, either directly by a number of meetings and joint projects, but also indirectly by the very salience of the relationship in wider policy and media debate. And this strengthened intensity might have had new items on the to-do list: the situation of people displaced by war, fleeing war, and seeking cooperation of others who are in better position. But it has eventually brought us back to questions that have shaped the relations from the onset: trust, belonging, and misunderstanding. And these three aspects are interrelated and could help us to see what I call architectures of similarity, perhaps a different angle than the commonly used perspective of othering Turkey as the other, EU as the other, or related uniqueness, yeah? Because both Turkey and the EU talk about themselves as unique polities, which they certainly are, but it should not prevent us from seeing the architectures of similarity. Now, trust. References to trust and credibility are frequently floated in the discussion on the refugee deal. But trust is not a new word. We talked about trust ever since Turkey's accession process became a thing. And many in Turkey and in the EU have been disappointed that the accession process was partially suspended just a year after it started. And many in the EU and Turkey did not expect the slowdown in harmonization with the EU law. Now, why do I mention accession talks when the panel is on the refugee deal? Because these two processes are inseparable. We cannot talk about them as unrelated agendas. In EU-Turkey relations, everything is connected. The refugee deal has been critiqued for externalizing responsibility. It was not a first deal of this type that the EU has closed. It was the first time, though, that it has happened regarding a candidate country. So perspectives on the others' perceived lack of commitment in migration affairs are shaped also by experience from the accession process. But it is not just the past experience. The accession future seems to have been postponed, perhaps indefinitely, according to some perspectives, with the deal. Which brings us to questions of belonging. From the outset of the diplomatic relations and the deeper accession framework, questions such as, is Turkey a European country? Does it belong to Europe? Have been key questions on the table. With the refugee deal, it seems that Turkey is sufficiently European to join the EU in migration affairs, but not sufficiently European to join it in many other affairs. At least this is what we learn from review of the policies. And we are used to talking about the EU as if they were one person. We explore EU perspectives on the deal, Turkish perspectives on the deal, and reality is, of course, more complicated, as I believe most people in the room already know. So when the deal was adopted, the map of joys and disappointments did not follow national or EU, non-EU boundaries. There was no celebration in the EU and sadness in Turkey or vice versa. The map of reflections was more patchy. And it is this fragmented map of perspectives across the imagined EU-Turkey divide and our normal human need to seek clarity, to put things into boxes, to categorize them, that perhaps paradoxically produces many misunderstandings. So one of them is the assumption of single-handed intentionality. And I will now stay this final part on the EU side, the imagined divide. So if we think about the EU as a political system with many competing and contradicting voices, a cacophonous entity, then we understand better that there were cacophonies even within the member states. Even those states that rejected refugees saw loud opposition. And even those governments that opened their doors were not uncontested by their own opponents who were suggesting that this was not a good policy. So the externalization, which was subjected to deep critique, is a result of a multitude of decisions. And some of these decisions are taken by people who do not have correct information, but this is not for the lack of availability of information about what the refugee deal actually does. Academics, journalists, policymakers have produced whole libraries covering the details. But what we seem to be learning, and not just in the field of EU-Turkey relationship, but in many more areas of social and political affairs pertaining to our societies, we see that the evidence is not always a basis for policy. And going back to our relationship, this has been the case with accession process, but also with migration partnership. Let me conclude with a note on internal fragmentation within the Union, because in parallel to exchange of views about responsibility between EU and Turkey, we have watched the debate on the so-called East-West split in the EU. And this debate often could not avoid merging facts with fictions and fairy tales, such as the one of the good West, which has understood EU values, and the bad East, which is backward, racist, and overall still catching up. Now, footnote reference, we know debates about catching up from EU-Turkey relations. So the map of values, of course, is more fragmented. Anti-immigration rhetoric and policy is not Eastern or Western. Even EU governments that have rejected refugees faced substantial opposition at home. And it has been well understood by many around the continent that anti-refugee mobilizations have been often a substitute policy. Why substitute policy? Because the said governments have not been able to fulfill their part of the social contract with their own citizens. Think infrastructure, specific domestic policies, health, education, etc. But they had to offer something. Now, clearly, no state should be able to reject asylum seekers in principle. Of course, it makes sense to discuss specific policies, preparation of public administration, etc. But we are now 5 years on from the beginning of the debate. And unfortunately, in a number of states on the EU side, we have not seen much learning, much using of this time to adjust and to perhaps reverse the policy. And we also have to be aware of the fact that while civil society, cities, NGOs, social movements, or spontaneous volunteer collectives have played a key role in making sure that at least some of the refugee needs are met, civil society does not make decisions on who can enter and who cannot. Governments do. And there is one part of EU.
2 minutes.
In fact, I will be shorter. There is one part of EU policy process which has not worked quite well in recent years, and this would be helping each other to find the better way. If the process of European integration has delivered, has achieved something over the past decades, it has been, among else, this convergence of priorities and raising the standards in a number of policy areas. This has been achieved with quite some success. In the migration debate, however, those who could have pushed more for raising common standards decided not to push too much. Eventually, the problem of commitment within the EU, the problem of solidarity as a system of rights and obligations resembles the same problem in Turkey and EU relations. So 5 years on, we have much more knowledge about this architecture of similarity. I'm not sure we fully understand what to do with that knowledge. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you so much for giving us the general philosophical, like starting from the philosophical debate in that regard. And I totally agree with you that this mistrust-trust issue has a long history between Turkey relations. And I think it has become a bit more clear in the last 5 years through this general change of track of relationships on a more specific policy-oriented approach that has been criticized being too instrumental sometimes, too technical, too instrumental, which moved the Turkey-EU accession process in a different kind of track. And this is why we have all these challenges ahead of us in certain ways. And this is something that has to be thought from a philosophical point of view as well. And I would also like to mention that there are certain things that has been the priority for the EU. So the priorities have been different from the EU side of things and from the Turkish side. And some of those priorities matched, but some of them did not necessarily. And that's how we see the relationship moving forward in a more bumpy road because of this. And after saying this, we will move a bit further and deeper into the Turkey-EU side of this policy. And we're going to look, now we're going to have İlke Toygür, who's the analyst of European affairs at Elcano Royal Institute. And she's also the Katz Fellow in German Institute for International and Security Studies. And she's also teaching geopolitics at Geopolitics of Europe at Carlos III University of Madrid. So she's joining us from Madrid today. So we have Prague, we have Madrid, we have the diversity of geographical locations. And İlke is going to be talking on the transactional or rules-based Turkey relations today. And floor is yours, İlke.
Thank you very much, Başak, for this introduction and also for inviting me here. I think I will pick up where Lucia left and bring this to today and try to connect the EU-Turkey statement on refugees to the general overview, general framework of Turkey-EU relations. For me, the deal has been the cornerstone, and I will try to explain why around 3 dimensions throughout my intervention. The first one is on the framework, how we have changed mainly from accession negotiations to a transactional framework with additional elements. Secondly, how this has impacted the credibility of the Union in general and enlargement policy in particular. And last but not least, how it has affected the institutional setup in the Union when it comes to Turkey-EU relations, and how we have changed from supranationalism to intergovernmental bargaining. So if we start with the shaping of this transactional framework, as we all know, Turkey today is defined as a strategic partner of the EU, and the issue of migration management is one of the key areas of cooperation together with security, counterterrorism, and economy. And regardless of the domestic situation in Turkey, and today I would like to underline this once again, regardless of the domestic situation in Turkey, which still is a candidate country that is required to fulfill the Copenhagen criteria, we see concrete transactional collaboration, and I will come back to that at the end. But if we go back to 2015, the signing of the negotiations before the signing of the deal, many will remember the EU's member states were deeply divided on the issue of fair burden sharing of refugees within the Union. So they thought that the only option was to halt refugees before entering, hence containing them in a third state. And this was decided to be Turkey. And this political crisis caused by irregular migration led to revitalization of Turkey relations also back then. Maybe you will remember Merkel's visits to Turkey, high-level dialogue meetings that gave Erdogan government the much-needed push right before the November 2015 runoff. Even the progress report in 2015 was postponed. Its publication was postponed. So overall, the negotiations of the deal and a deal that was intended to be an emergency response has started to shape the general framework and the functioning of Turkey-EU relations back then, and it has continued until now. It is clear that this deal was an emergency response, and so many colleagues in the European Union are still very much convinced on the necessity of it. But while this was being shaped, there were 3 dimensions normally related to accession negotiations, and another parallel track of visa liberalization were also added into the Turkey-EU statement on refugees. So we are seeing a statement on refugee collaboration, mainly based on a transactional framework, which includes important items from accession negotiations and a parallel track of visa liberalization. So we have visa liberalization roadmap included. We have references to upgrading of the customs union, and we also have a constant process, constant promise of re-energizing accession process, opening of a chapter, which has happened, by the way, and it has been the last chapter that was opened in June 2016. That was all embedded, integrated in Turkey-EU statement on refugees. So we are constantly seeing here mixing of accession negotiations and official candidacy process with a transactional engagement, which was supposed to be a short-term solution of externalization for the European Union. So all these developments in 2015-16 that we all very much know in detail opened the door to a more transactional relationship, even while the domestic conditions in Turkey were not necessarily fit to it. So for me, according to my perspective, this has consequences for the credibility of the Union and the enlargement process, which mainly brings me to my second point. Because although the EU-Turkey statement helped substantially reducing irregular migration and dangerous crossings, so helped saving lives, and I think we are all, after 5 years, we are all grateful for that, it turned out to be something beyond short term. And Lucia also mentioned this very clearly. And the statement has transformed the relationship and the cooperation's framework with a deal, with a statement whose legality is still very open to discussion. I still remember that back then, The Economist published an article saying that every element of the arrangement is politically, legally, and morally problematic, but still necessary. So we are talking about such a deal shaping or being at the center of Turkey-EU relations as such. And I think this deal also created an unbalanced equation between Turkey and the EU, where the EU could offer almost no carrots to Turkey. I'm sure that my other colleagues will talk about how FRIT worked well, the money was distributed, it was used, so I'm not going to get into that. But more or less, it was the only working part of the statement at the end of the day, because the other promises, except one chapter being opened during the Dutch presidency, they were not kept, but gave in the meantime this unbalanced equation President Erdogan the possibility to threat the European Union to allow massive numbers of refugees to enter the EU, which has initiated in February 2020 at the end of the day. So to put it differently, in my opinion, thanks to this deal, leverage has been very much reversed. And in this case, making the deal politically very highly costly for the European Union itself, not getting so much into the normative constraints related to the EU's own values, how it has been alienating from these values, how EU insisted on keeping refugees outside its territory, wanted to securitize the response, etc., etc. So I'm not going to get into the normative part of the deal so much, but mostly how it has reshaped the leverage process between the existence of leverages between the European Union and Turkey, and how this short-term solution, or supposed to be a short-term solution to outsource the problem, change the balances in the relationship. And connecting to that, my third and last point is mainly the changing role of EU institutions and how the intergovernmental bargaining in every step of Turkey-EU relations became a norm in Turkey-EU relations. Because we all know that this crisis has once again revealed the interdependency between the two parties. But since we are lacking a framework that is based on structured cooperation and shared responsibility, even if accession negotiations are still there, they are officially frozen and not necessarily served. We are basing this relationship mostly on a transactional setup that is continuously intergovernmentally negotiation. So we have the European Commission, the role of it decreasing constantly, while the Council and the European Council becoming very important players when it comes to Turkey-EU relations. So I think I need to wrap up. No, Başak, I'm seeing your face there. Just one concluding remark. So when we see the latest situation, we are observing that national interests are at the heart, bilateral relations are at the heart, intergovernmental negotiations, both within the EU and also between Turkey and the EU, are the new reality. And what we are seeing and what we have seen in European Council conclusions from October and December, and next week is not going to be so different than that, is a constant bargaining rather than a rules-based framework between Turkey and the European Union. I will stop there, not abusing my time, and very happy to come back to points in question and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilke. Thank you for the comprehensive overview of how the Turkey-EU relations have been transformed into a transactional relationship, which is actually not necessarily very beneficial for the EU's enlargement process as well. So it's setting up a bad example in that regard, and how the credibility of the EU has been questioned in this whole process. And unfortunately, as it's been mentioned, the legally, morally, and politically, questionable deal has been going on in the next 5 years, and it looks like this is going to be taken as a model for other kind of. It's going to be exported even further. It's going to be outsourced even further, and we will get to that. But you are absolutely right. When we look at the numbers, there are certain things that has been done in a way beneficially out of this deal, where the numbers have reduced. When we look at 2015, it was about 900,000 people irregularly crossing. In 2016, it has dropped to 180,000. In 2017, it was only 40,000 irregular crossings. And the deaths at sea has also reduced from 4,000, 5,000 to 3,000, 2,000. And in 2020, it was only 1,500. Obviously, the pandemic has played its role in terms of the numbers, but deaths at sea has been decreased. So this human smuggling has been reduced. But one also has to, like numbers, Başak Hoca loves the numbers and quantitative data, but we have to look to the numbers with a pinch of salt as well. What happened to those people who didn't cross, right? Are they in a safer location? Are they still safe where they're back home? So when we look at these numbers, we see that about 28,000 people being resettled to this one-to-one deal to the EU countries. What happens to the other ones who are not being resettled? And also from Greece, it's about 5,000 refugees have been returned back to their countries of origin. Was it really safe for these people to return back to their countries of origin? So those are the questions we also have to ask. And without any further ado, and I will be moving to our next speaker, Başak Yavçan. She's a senior researcher at the Hugo Observatory of Environment, Migration and Politics at the University of Liège, and working on the Horizon 2020 project MAGIC. And she's also an associate professor of political science and international relations in TOBB University. And she's also the coordinator of the migration program there. And she's going to be talking about the new mechanism of multi-level governance and the local refugee integration policy. So we're moving from the state level, from the bilateral level, to the local level, and we will see how this multi-level governance is actually operating at the local level. The floor is yours, Başak Hoca.
Thank you, Başak, for this wonderful introduction, and I'd like to thank all of our speakers today, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk with them today as part of also representing the two co-sponsors of this panel, METUMIR and Hugo Observatory. And as a result of these, I will actually refer to my research in both contexts, both in Belgium as part of the Hugo Observatory, especially in relation to the research conducted with the Horizon project MAGIC, as well as my field research from Turkey and the recent research we have conducted with Fulya Memişoğlu as well. So in doing this, I will try to approach a topic, approach the deal, the EU-Turkey deal, as a not in an attempt to explain it, but in an attempt to address its impact on local governance, and to try to see what kind of changes it introduced us in trying to understand a local migration policy. And my response to this is really rooted in the recent scholarly research, which grew as a reaction to national integration policy debates, comparisons, which are mostly rooted in path-dependent explanations, because of a realization that there is a lot of variation at the local level when it comes to different refugee or migrant governance mechanisms. That's partly because of the divergent logics of integration, because differences in legal status become irrelevant at the local level, where the main concern is to build a community and relationships. And so the literature on this points out that local governance of migration can work both ways. It can be both inclusive and exclusive. The work package 6 of our MAGIC project, which is a research team that has been exploring how migration governance has been influenced by the Syrian refugee crisis in particular, and how crises at large shape policy responses across time and space, focuses at the exclusive local practices and policies, and how these dynamic interactions between actors influence policy outcomes, both in terms of horizontal and vertical dimensions. And so they, for instance, look at how mayors matter, how public opinion matters, ideology matters. And you have municipalities, say in Italy, where through municipal ordinances, mayors can deny access to several rights, such as healthcare, welfare benefits, access to education, etc., or a lack of bureaucratic organization can also create an obstacle to proper implementation of a rather more inclusive national frameworks, whereas you have the exact opposite, the cities of refuge or sanctuary cities, which promote integration, especially when the state remains undecided or hostile to migration. In regards to, and when this research focuses mostly on NGOs, grassroots mobilization, and also looks at refugees as actors themselves, migrants as actors themselves, the migrant communities, but also, of course, the more administrative structures of local governance, mainly municipalities. So what do we see? Where do I get from this in relation to the EU-Turkey deal is as follows. So already in Turkey, because the pressure of migration, and here we're talking about very high numbers of people accumulated in urban centers, already we have several constraints that stem from the law on municipalities, where municipalities find themselves operating in a gray zone. And looking at it from the positive perspective, what could be the positive ways in which integration of refugees can be affected at the municipality level or at the local level? It depends on the size of municipality, economy of the municipality, organizational and bureaucratic decision-making, political constituency, as well as, of course, because it is closely related to, the issue is closely related to social acceptance, and just like national level politicians, mayors are also seeking re-election, and venues and networks of the municipality, which is where we wanted to focus on, and which is where the EU facility has been a case for us, a case that promotes integration in the local level, at the local level in Turkey. Now, having conducted research, field research in several municipalities, but especially for this multi-level focusing on exclusively on Şişli and Sultanbeyli municipalities in Istanbul, we have found that prior to this EU migration deal, or prior to the Syrian influx, or having to deal with the Syrian influx, they, Şişli, for instance, had an EU politics department, medium-scale projects for disadvantaged groups, such as the LGBTI, and strong links, strong multi-level networks in other areas. But with in the aftermath, through different collaborations with national and international NGOs and international organizations, and they actually have 20 partnerships at the multi-level, multinational level at this point. Same with Sultanbeyli, especially it started at a lower point and ended up in a brilliant point, as we all know. It had a strategy department and experience with very small scale EU projects for disadvantaged groups, such as the disabled, and very limited multi-level governance. Currently, it has 35 partnerships with public institutions, international and national NGOs. And the majority of these funds that are allocated through these collaborations are the facility funds overall. And we see that they not only empower the municipalities in terms of increasing their capacity, but they also help them to increase their know-how as well in this issue area, their language and their expertise. And then where you basically have, when we ask municipalities to express it in their words, they believe that they're less bureaucratic structures of the municipalities provide non-governmental and international agencies a flexible ground for implementation of their policies, and they believe that they are to be very long-lived, because the municipalities themselves express that projects and programs keep going even if there is a bilateral political dispute with the grantor, funder country at the national level. So furthermore, they also point out that when these donors have difficulty in securing, I'll wrap it up, in securing partnerships at the national level, more eager municipalities that are facing with the pressures introduced by refugees in terms of the integration pressures are actually more open to collaborate with them. So that also creates kind of a bypassing mechanism for them. And that is precisely why, which is why we're not surprised to see that municipalities are one of the actors that are discussed a lot in what will be the future of the deal, what will be the new deal like between EU and Turkey, because they did provide a fertile ground for cooperation in a positive way, not in an exclusive way, but in an inclusive way in general. Of course, this is only one of the issues that promote integration, having good networks, multi-level networks, and the EU facility contributes to that. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to going deeper into possible constraints, possible obstacles in creating these networks. Thank you.
Thank you, Başak Hocam. Yes, and now we were at the local level, and the local level is a very critical level, because what we have seen with 4 million refugees and persons under temporary protection is that it is at the local level that that all the services are being provided, the local integration efforts have been provided, and local authorities, I mean municipalities, become unbelievably critical, especially in the case of Turkey, where most of the refugees, more than 98% of the refugees, are actually in the urban areas. And this is something that has to be taken into consideration, but in terms of the national legislation, but at the same time at the EU level as well, and also for the donor countries to consider in terms of shaping their the funding to include the local governments and local authorities, because they are the ones usually who are dealing with most of the challenges, and they are the ones on the first hand with the refugees and the asylum seekers. And this is something that's been mentioned with the Global Compact for Refugees, but we don't necessarily see too much of an action so far in that regard. So we're now moving to Deniz Sert, and she's an associate professor at the Department of International Relations at Özyeğin University in Istanbul. And she worked as a senior research associate at the Migration Center Mirakoç previously. And she's the Jean Monnet Chair of Migration and Mobility, and also the editor of the International Migration Journal. So Deniz will be talking on how we deal with the better lives for refugees in Turkey, especially with respect to the FRIT projects. So again, moving on to how much of it that touches the refugees from up to down and down to up. Deniz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Başak Hocam. I will share screen with you, and hopefully this will work out. I hope it does right now. Thank you for the opportunity. I want to, before I go on, I want to say two things. One is about the numbers. It has already been stated that the numbers have been dropping after the agreement, but there is also this argument that we should remember. The numbers have already, the numbers were already decreasing before the deal was signed in March. So there's this argument on the ground that those people who wanted to cross has already crossed before that. And also, again, about the numbers, we also have to understand that although the number of deaths have decreased along the sea because less people are crossing, IOM's Missing Migrants project have shown us that the rate of deaths along the sea has not really dropped. And we also always remember, we should always remember research or surveys conducted by the civil society organizations on the field have shown us that since this deal, we are seeing more and more violence on the side of the security forces, both in Greece and Turkey, against the refugees, which are rather problematic. To go back to my own point about the FRIT projects, this is a work in progress. So, please bear with me if there are any issues with regard to this.
Can you make the slide to like the whole presentation to be a full screen, if you could?
Okay, isn't it full screen now?
Now you're full screen, but if you can have the presentation full screen, then we can see.
Okay, 1 minute. Let me try to do this again. Is it?
Yes, now it's fine.
Right.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So this is the, by the way, this map is from the website of the European Commission on FRIT. As you can see with FRIT, as a colleague of mine has stated very, very rightfully, we now have an ecosystem. These are the projects in different provinces of Turkey that are funded by FRIT. So you can see that FRIT is everywhere almost within Turkey. Let me give you some facts about the FRIT. As you all know, there have been 2 phases of FRIT. The first phase is already concluded. In the second phase, we still have certain projects continuing and the money is still coming in. There has been a total of 112 projects funded by FRIT. And some of the questions that come about this is that, are there direct funds to civil society organizations in Turkey? No. Only 2 projects, one by Assam, SGDD, and the other one by TOBB, were directly funded by the FRIT. Direct funds going to public organizations in Turkey? Again, no. Of all the 112 projects, only 4 public organizations were directly funded in Turkey, and these are the DGMM, Director General of Migration Management, Ministry of Family, Labor and Social Services, Ministry of Health, and Ministry of National Education. So who gets the funds? As you can see, most of the funds are actually going to the public. Although, the public includes actually 2 groups, the institutions that I have counted within Turkey, also certain public institutions in other EU countries as well. UN gets a large chunk. I mean, different UN agencies is also getting a large chunk of the funds. And different INGOs, international governmental organizations, international organizations, and non-governmental organizations are also receiving the funds. And a very small chunk, the green line, the green chunk that you can see is going to the administrative costs of FRIT. What can we say about the differences between phase 1 to phase 2? As you can see, we are seeing that more from phase 1 to phase 2, there is more funds provided for development projects and less funds for humanitarian projects. So yesterday we were discussing this among ourselves, and I was saying, oh, maybe the European Commission is listening to the criticisms of the academics, and maybe they are moving towards a more rights-based approach than a needs-based approach. But I don't know, we couldn't come up to an agreement on that. What are the funds used for? As you can see from this, a large chunk is going to basic needs, education, socioeconomic support, and health. And smaller chunks are going to municipal infrastructure, protection, migration management, and again, going to administrative costs. Just to attract some attention, the top, actually, the projects, the top 5, top 6, 7, let me see, yes, 6, 7. I actually just included those projects that received more than 300 million euros are these projects. As you can see, World Food Program, Emergency Social Safety Net, the third tranche, we can say, is actually the highest. Second and third tranches are receiving the highest funds from FRIT. I will talk about the ESSN in a second. So World Food Program, Ministry of National Education, and Ministry of Health, as well as the IFRC, are the beneficiaries that receive the largest amount from FRIT. And this is my last slide, so Başak, bear with me. I want to cite Faruk Kaymakçı here. In one İKB panel, he said, FRIT is like Belgian frites. It makes you feel stuff, but doesn't feed. And I mean, I really loved how he put it. So what are the problems here? I mean, I have certain issues with FRIT. Yeah, I mean, FRIT is the only thing that we can say, or one of the two things that have been working with this readmission agreement, the deal, etc. One problem that I have with FRIT is the transaction costs, because the money is going from the donor to international organization, and then, as you can see in the map that I have shared, that international organization finds a national or local partner, and then the recipient receives a certain amount of fund. What can be the solutions? Well, blockchain technology that removes intermediaries, maybe, but then that whole ecosystem might collapse. Maybe more funds can be directly given to local actors. And this is directly related to what Başak Yavçan was saying about the importance of municipalities in the internet integration policies and projects. Another problem that I have is that there is still, I mean, despite the fact that phase 2 had more development projects than humanitarian projects, I think there is still more need more rights-based approaches when we are giving the funds. Yes, livelihood is important, by the way, I want to underline that not all refugees, migrants can become entrepreneurs, because most of the projects that we see on the ground right now about livelihood are related to entrepreneurship. And maybe there might be other openings there. Maybe more importance can be given to vocational training, for example. Still, FRIT is important. Why? Because ESSN, it is the biggest humanitarian aid project. Some of you might ask, what is that? It is the 120 lira per person per month that is given to Syrians. And it has 1.8 million recipients. Almost 50% of Syrians in Turkey are eligible to receive the fund. And this is quite successful in that sense. And it is still important because it is important for the civil society in Turkey, as not all of the civil society have access to public collaboration or resources otherwise. And as I have already shown you, it has an ecosystem of its own now. But I still have doubts about the actors in this ecosystem. I'm not really sure whether they are really talking to each other, or whether there is enough collaboration among the actors within that ecosystem. And it is also important for municipalities in Turkey because, as Başak Hoca has already mentioned, there are really no other funds available for them. And it is important for people like me because I can easily use this against anti-migrant racist arguments, stating that it is not your taxes. It is also something, I mean, FRIT is also something on a maybe very minor level that help us to actually come up with an argument against such claims. And I will end here.
Thank you, Deniz Hocam. How can I stop you when you're quoting Sayın Kaymakçı in terms of the French fries? We might have to translate it in Turkish too because it also sounds great in Turkish.
Evet, Frit Belçika friti gibi tıkıyor ama karın doyurmuyor demişti.
Yes, absolutely. It is essential, as you've said. Some might think that 120 liras is not necessarily a substantial amount of money. And you might even question if it's necessary, but it is. I mean, our fieldwork research has proved that it is absolutely necessary. And it is very, very critical. I can see among us that there are some researchers, maybe they can also mention a little bit in the question and answer session why it is important, because the research has shown that sometimes that's the only money, especially during the COVID circumstances, that is available in that household. And there are even questions whether or not this should be extended to include not only the Syrian population, but also including other populations are displaced as well, which could actually increase its impact. But I've been told that sometimes that it is not possible from the EU side of things. And maybe if we're talking about what is next in the future, maybe that's what we should be discussing as well, how to transform the existing circumstances and situation. Now the floor is open to questions. Now I can see that there is a raised hand. Barçın İnanç is raising the hand. So Barçın, please go ahead and pose your question.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to extend my appreciation to all the academic works and all the academics who are doing research on this subject, because as a journalist, I really am well informed and I feel really enriched by their perspective. But here I'm not, I have a deadline for a paper, so I will be leaving in a short while. So mine is not going to be an academic perspective, but I'm going to bring a perspective of a journalist. And this is not going to be a question, but something you might want to challenge or talk about it or take note. But as a journalist, I have always, I've been covering Turkish-EU relations since 1990, and it has never been easy. It has always been an uphill battle, and the two sides have never been on the right page. When Turkey was ready, the EU was not ready. When the EU was ready, Turkey was not ready. And it was always negotiations for this and that. I never had a nice, easygoing EU-Turkey summit as a journalist, spending long nights covering these impasses. So to me, maybe this is a matter of professional deformation. When I see this kind of transactionalism, I'm not sort of surprised. There was always this type of a transactionalism in bilateral ties. And in this instance, I would like to come in favor of the latest Turkish-EU deal because it had provided some kind of a lifeline between Turkey and EU. Until then, there was no talk of Turkish-EU relations. 10 years ago, in 2010, I, as a journalist, could have name you the names of the 3 top EU officials. In 2015, you know, I didn't even know who was the name of the enlargement commissioner, whereas in 2010 he would be the #1 public notorious guy in Turkey. So this deal at least have brought the Turkish EU agenda back on the Turkish public opinion. Even this to me was important. And when we are talking about transactionalism, look, I think that we have to keep in mind that the coup attempt of 2016 has come at such an unfortunate moment that all of the articles that were foreseen to revitalize Turkey-EU relations had to be put on the back burner. Now, some of you might say, even if there was not a coup attempt, the Turkish government would have not genuinely come out for a democratic reform. Obviously, this would be a hypothetical question, but certainly the coup attempt has changed the paradigm. There was too many security approach, and I am going to wrap up very quickly. Today, if the customs union revitalization or revision is not decided, well, that's because there is a value-based relationship, because Europe has said, unless you do something, you improve the situation in democratic issues, we cannot take that decision. So I don't think this is totally transactional. And to wrap up, even if next week there will be a Turkey chapter, a Turkey discussion on the EU summit, even that for us, it's a good reminder that there's some kind of a relationship between Turkey and EU. So I just wanted to come in favor of this deal, looking from the Turkish-EU bilateral perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Yavçan. Thank you for your insight and the comments. It's unbelievably valuable to look at it from in a long term as well, not just to take in the last 5 years. I was mentioning to my students this morning, and I was talking, and then I suddenly realized they were in the secondary school when this deal happened. So we have to look at the perspective in a longer time frame, especially considering the fact that the Turkey relations has been more than half a century. So it's important to look at what were the obstacles and not to repeat the mistakes and over again. So yeah, totally on board. Thank you. Thank you, Yavçan. Are there any further questions? I mean, the chat is open for questions, or you can raise your hand. If not, I will obviously. I have been muted. Okay, I have a question. I think there is a question that's been raised. Müge, would you like to ask the question? Can you ask it yourself? Okay, please go ahead. Unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thank you, Hocam. I don't know why I could not raise the hand. There was no button. Thank you for your speech. It was really really inspiring, and I could also look more macro level because I'm working in more local level and in Greece in the field. So it was a widening perspective. My question is, İlke Hocam said that it started as an emergency response in 2016, but it was for arranging 5 years, and it also gave birth to many legislation changes, especially in Greece. So it had more midterm developments, and now we are expecting 5 more years extension. Probably today they are still talking, and we heard some kind of announcements, but not with the details. So we are talking about 10 years of impact, but started as an emergency response. So my question to what does it say in terms of the European Common Migration Policy as emergency response, but affecting that large period? And secondly, we also see its impact on the new pact of migration in Europe. So in fact, it is not only about Greek-Turkish context, but EU tries to widening this statement and statement-like projects maybe. So when we think about these two things together, what would we say about the common policy and its formation? Maybe İlke hocam or Başak hocam would reply, or any hocam who wants to respond to the question. Thank you.
I think maybe because you first directed the question, maybe İlke hoca can respond back, and then Başak hoca can take on it. And if any other panelists would like to have a comment. Müge is our PhD student at METU, and she has extensive field work even in the Moria camp. So she was able to visit the camp after the fire, and she shared her thoughts with us through the METUMIR, and we have the talk recorded in METUMIR YouTube website. I'm making the advertisement here at the same time. Yes, please, İlke, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Başak, and also to Barton and Müge for their comments and questions. If you let me, I think I will start with Barton's remarks on transactionalism, because I think I should put also on the table that I'm okay with some type of transactional relationship between Turkey and the EU, rather than not having anything at all. So I think we agree with Barton there. But my issue is this framework, transactional framework of one key issue, and then including various dimensions of usually rules-based relationship introduced in the same framework, is not necessarily my ideal type of relationship. So mixing, for example, visa liberalization and accession negotiations, even customs union modernization, with an EU-Turkey statement on refugees, for me, is not the ideal framework that is supposed to be on the table on Turkey-EU relations. There might be additional arrangements regarding the topic, be it migration, be it energy, be it counterterrorism. Of course, this is there because one simple reason: the interdependency between Turkey and the European Union, but not necessarily mixing all the relationship at the same time. And I really wonder when you said that, for example, customs union modernization is not on the table because of the domestic situation or in Turkey. I think it's partly true. It is not also on the table because Turkey has been threatening the national interests of some EU member states according to their perspective in 2020. It is not there because European public opinions are not necessarily in favor of making things better with Turkey. It is not there because there are elections in Germany and France. So it is not there for various reasons. It is not necessarily a guarantee that we still have a rules-based framework on the table. So what I just wanted to say, of course, Turkey-EU relations should happen, and we are very happy that there's a line, as you have said. But I think that both sides should spend more time and energy on how to reshaping these relations in a rules-based framework, in an institutional framework, and not necessarily ad hoc arrangements. And for me, legally questionable ad hoc arrangements that includes this and that from various frameworks. That's where I stand. When I come to Müge's question, I think this is a very good question, and I'm sure Başak will say more on that. But for me, the EU didn't use necessarily wisely this period of 5 years, but I think I will be defending the EU right now because I think even if I don't agree with not coming out with a common migration policy, and every article I write that I keep on defending that unless there's a common migration policy that rooted in responsibility sharing, these kind of deals and delegations to third countries will be on the table. But it was not necessarily the best time for the EU to come out with more common policies in this interval. Because if we also think about the last 2 decades of the EU, in the beginning of the decade, the constitutional crisis, then the Eurozone crisis, then the political crisis caused by irregular migration, then Brexit, Donald Trump in the White House, and then COVID-19. So it was not necessarily the best period to come up with alternative common policies. But I strongly encourage all European scholars and Turkish scholars to put this issue in the context of Conference on the Future of Europe. Turkey is not necessarily involved in the conference, at least now, because of the situation. I am not going to elaborate on that, but this is not necessarily stopping us from coming up with ideas and policy proposals in that regard. So I will very much encourage Müge, and I will stop there to come up with proposals based on facts and field work, and bring it to the table during the conference, so that the EU leaders can also take lessons from that. I think I will stop there, Başak.
Thank you. Başak Hocam, would you like to comment on Müge's point?
Başak, you are muted.
Başak, you're muted.
My apologies. I'll be happy to comment on that and link it to Barçın's remarks as well. I believe the Turkey-EU deal, Compact Jordan, Compact Lebanon, all of these readmission agreements, they fit perfectly to the new Pact on Migration and Asylum, one of the pillars of which is the strong external dimension and partnership with third parties, and really guided by the philosophy of externalization, which is why we are a bit wary of this transactionalism, because it goes hand in hand with the externalization, which in general is seen in migration management not as a sustainable way of governing migration. It's not really governing, it's, you know, deferring the issue and keeping it outside of your borders. And I believe that's why the transactional approach bothers us so much, because it also goes hand in hand with this externalization, and which actually makes the migration, refugee crises, not only makes the EU more immune, more isolated from the origin of the conflict, but also makes it difficult, further securitizes this issue domestically within many EU countries. And that on its own is also, I believe, a challenge for EU-Turkey relations in general, beyond the refugee deal. And if we were to assess the mistakes and successes, I mean, there are many, but let me just focus on the successes of the deal and mistakes of the deal in particular, and what is to be learned next connected to that in answering this question. I think I agree with Deniz about this employment dimension and vocational trainings to create more sustainability rather than purely promoting humanitarian or social aid, whichever you call it. But what we have seen is actually extensive use of vocational trainings and entrepreneurship programs, but very little job creation. And this is something we have also argued with Kemal Kirişçi as well, with the lack of job creation. It really prevents any sustainable self-sufficient integration into the labor market from the perspective of refugees. And we have seen how detrimental this can be, especially in the face of the pandemic, because they were the first ones to lose their jobs. And we believe that more sustainable mechanisms through trade incentives for sectors where Syrians and Turks work together, and companies of Syrian and Turkish companies invest together, could be explored, just like it was for Compact Jordan. But will it be materialized? We do not know, but I would believe that this has also major implications on the social cohesion issues that have been becoming more and more threatening to the cohesion.
Okay, thank you, Başak Hocam. I think Rabia Karakaya has been raising the hand quite patiently. I'll get her question, and there has been another question that's been brought to my attention through the chat. Maybe we can combine those two questions. I don't know if they're related, by the way, but we'll see. Please go ahead, Rabia.
Okay, thank you very much for this all-female panel and the great contributions.
It's not a coincidence, by the way. That is totally conscious.
Great. I have myself been doing research about municipal responses to Syrian refugees in Turkey. So I especially found Başak Hoca's presentation very useful for my own research as well. So Başak Hoca talked about success stories at the local level. I myself did research in Sultanbeyli and Şişli, and it looks like municipalities achieve a lot with very little money, because Deniz Hoca also showed us that the amount of money coming from FRIT to local government is very limited. So it looks like there is a lot of potential for municipalities to achieve if they have the resources and if they have the political power, obviously. So my question is, Başak Hoca also said that the next Turkey-EU deal might have more role for local government. So I was wondering if this is something that she expects, or if this is something like she wishes. Do we have any indications that there will be more role for local government? And related to this, even if there will be, what about the national constraints that we have in Turkey? The fact that municipalities are politically very weak, and there is an increasing pressure on municipalities. So even if they have the money, do you think they will be able to use it in an autonomous way? Will they be pragmatic and creative, which my research shows, but I wonder your thoughts. And secondly, and related to this, what kind of role do you see for NGOs in this scenario? Because we know that usually municipalities are working in cooperation with NGOs. So that can that be a potential solution in an environment where municipalities are weak financially and politically? Thank you very much.
I know that the question has been addressed to Başak Hoca, but maybe Deniz Hoca can a little bit talk on that as well. But also, I think I would like Lucia to comment on the civil society part of the question, because I know that you have done also some research on how this the whole EU-Turkey deal impacted the workers of civil society. Maybe you can say a few words as well. Floor is yours, Başak.
Shall I start with the responses? Okay, thank you, Yavçan, for this comprehensive assessment and question. And well, it is both my wish and my initial information gathered that there is that direction in terms of including municipalities more directly in the future. But of course, as you said, this really depends on the central government's position on this as well. If it's unwilling, reluctant to do this, it would be clearly an issue. But I do believe that it can be, I mean, the reason why this issue can be circumvented, in my opinion, is because the municipalities we're talking about are of all ideologies, including the government's own ideology, and many of the actually municipalities who are doing great work in this regard are AK Party municipalities. And so, in other words, the municipalities of their own political affiliation would benefit from this kind of a focus as well. But I would like to give an example from France, actually. And there are scholars in France that illustrate that even with a centralized states as much as Turkey, implementing a strong assimilationist model, some cities still manage to define and implement their own urban programs of welcoming immigrants more like multicultural frameworks. So, I mean, not only do they get help in implementation, but they also change the framework, change the national framework, which I believe is important. And this kind of what we can call decoupling in multi-level governance is likely to occur where there is a level of shared responsibility, but a lack of shared framing of the problem, much like the Turkish case. So the fact that at the national level there is an ownership of the issue definitely helps in this regard as well. And so I do expect and would like more place
for the municipalities in the New Deal. But again, there are other factors that may constrain municipalities, such as the public opinion turning quite negative towards refugees. And therefore, these programs, which actually already have host community quotas, maybe should be increased or should be made more public, made more available to public, that it's happening and they can take advantage of this. And another constraint could be the organizational structure, and so more sustainable capacity enhancement projects should be undertaken. And I do also see the seeds of this also with an important project also financed by, if I'm not mistaken, by FRIT, which is RESLOC, Resilience in Local Governance, another good practice. And it collaborates with several municipalities, unions, and international organizations and municipalities, and aims at increasing resilience of local administrations heavily affected by refugee flows through mutual learning, integrated urban planning, and improved governance mechanisms. And in our fieldwork, when we visited these places, actually, we have seen that this kind of mutual learning has really increased their awareness and their understanding of the availability of skill set and their approach to multi-level approach to foreign aid, basically. It's better to put it that way, because there is also in many municipalities still quite a reluctance, quite a suspicion towards collaborating with international NGOs. And with regards to NGOs, there are several perspectives that look at the role of NGOs in this, and most of these municipalities that do a good job do it because they circumvent the national framework with collaborations with NGOs, let's put it that way. And so I think those who manage to create sustainable relations with effective NGOs will manage this also. But again, on the role of this deal on solely NGOs is, I think, another discussion that I would love to take on at another event. But scholars will point out that this kind of professionalization can actually may have costs on the ideological commitments to refugee well-being, let's put it this way, more value-based commitment to refugee well-being, where NGOs are being set up to get funds and as a way of profession, as a company, as a firm. So, which is something that should be kept in mind when this issue is to be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Başak Hocam. And what I have to really keep in mind when it comes to municipalities in Turkey is that their funding is centralized, right? Turkey is a centralized country, the funding is centralized, and according to the municipality law, the money that is going to be distributed will be distributed with the number of citizens living in the municipality.
There's a discussion of change with that regard. We'll see.
Yeah, we will see. But some municipalities are using the second round of explanation when they take on board the neighborhood kind of perspective, hemşire. So it really depends if they have to apply a more maximalist or a minimalist kind of approach in terms of their funding, how this funding is going to be spent, basically. But the main catch here is the political commitment and how costly it is going to be. And I'm leaving the floor to Deniz Hoca in terms of her response, and then to Lucia.
In terms of Rabia Hoca's question, well, I mean, already we see a move, actually. If you compare phase 1 with phase 2, we are seeing more and more projects that are directed towards municipalities. In phase 1, it was only like 1. I mean, I can give you the numbers if you want. But in phase 2, we are seeing more visibility of municipalities on the list, if I may. So I think in the upcoming, I mean, we are already assuming that there's going to be an upcoming agreement. In the upcoming agreement, there will certainly be more role for the municipalities or more local actors further. But I wanna also make a comment about Barçın's point. with another quote from another foreign ministry official. I forgot his name, but I was in Brussels and we were discussing this deal, and everybody was thinking that this was a brilliant idea and it was a wonderful, innovative tool of migration management. In fact, we all know that it is not a wonderful, innovative tool, but it has been actually a tool. If you look at Casarino's work on this, I mean, readmission agreements have been used for a very long time, since, you know, EU 12 to EU 27. But I think we are all disregarding the fact that we are talking not only about irregular migrants, but asylum seekers. I think, I mean, we have normalized this deal very, very, very, I mean, yeah, we have normalized this deal, because if you think about it, in 2015, almost 85%, I think, of those people who crossed to Europe have received international protection. So they were genuine refugees. And the EU is trying to stop that. We should not forget this, you know, not leave it aside. But back to my quote, a Turkish official said in Brussels during this meeting, dialogue up to a point. This is exactly what he said in English. Yani diyalog bir yere kadar dedi. And actually this, this shows us something about me, and I think it actually also promotes what Barçın has said. For the first time, there is some kind of a transaction. The problem with this transaction, though, it didn't have a spillover effect as they assumed at the beginning, right? I mean, I cannot see any other areas where this transactionalism have moved forward. I mean, and usually in the EU, this is what we see, right? I mean, spillovers. That's how EU is actually re-emerging out of crises. But with this one, we are not there yet. So we'll see how it will move. And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Deniz Hocam. And Lucia, would you like to comment on the civil society side of things?
Thank you. Yeah, and congratulations to all of you for being so optimistic about the EU, how many powers it has, what all it can do, almost a magical entity. Now, yeah, 3 points. Yeah, the EU has externalization policy. It also has internalization policy. The enlargement thing still is on the table. It has not been forgotten. There is no policy of single intentionality of excluding 1 or 2 countries on purpose. And the trends, both in what the political leaders can say and what the public opinion thinks, are somehow related to developments in the countries awaiting accession. So that also should be kept on the table. Now, on the NGOs, the interesting thing is that whether you speak to NGOs in Turkey or you speak to NGOs to, say, Czechia, you will again notice a number of similarities. And one of them would be the burden of the project-based cycle. Yeah, this is already truism in civil society research. Now, it is very difficult, and Başak mentioned earlier that, there are dangers to professionalization. Of course, things are more genuine when we spontaneously, you know, invent new initiative, etc. But actually, to get effect, sometimes things have to be professional. Once you have a professional organization, you need to fund the people and the activities. So it is a circle, yeah, where one part of the circle follows the other. And I feel that even in countries which are more decentralized, the civil society has been experiencing a certain fatigue from having to chase the funds all the time, and at the same time really stretch their capacities, because caring work is demanding psychosocially, also for the care workers. And I believe that this is a wider trend, again, not just in specifically EU-Turkey relationship, not just in relation to the EU-Turkey refugee deal, which is not an EU-Turkey refugee deal, as you know, because we have the European Court of Justice opinion that the EU-Turkey deal is not an EU-Turkey deal. So this was also an interesting dimension, which we perhaps we can talk about it next time. Yeah, it was a measure, it was Orwellian. The measure was not adopted by the institutions of the European Union, the court opinion said, when a few people complained that their rights were violated by the deal. So the deal itself is in a strange legal limbo. But not to go too far, But good news in terms of cooperation of sub-state, local, regional actors. I certainly agree with your points that cities and whichever other organization is closer to provision of direct services, making the infrastructure, building connections, they are absolute key to integration. Yeah, I think there is a general understanding in migration research across Europe and also beyond Europe. Let me offer an interesting case from Slovakia, which until recently was ruled, it's an EU member state, joined in 2004, and it was until recently ruled by a government that built a lot of its momentum on the anti-migration rhetoric. I'm not going to quote everything they said, but one of the generous proposals they made in 2015 was that the country would accept 100 Syrians, which is, of course, when you say it in the Turkish context, so people start laughing. That's not 100,000, 100. Yeah, but despite the rather very restrictive and very problematic rhetoric of the government, NGOs have been able to work with the cities to create their own frameworks for not just refugee, migrant, more broadly speaking, integration, including refugees, but also migrant workers and other types of travelers. And the cities, the city councils have in fact welcomed the assistance that was provided by the NGO and setting up certain frameworks, because eventually the city understands, or the town or the municipality understands that, look, these people are here, so either we are going to look together, live together, in peace, if we do not have to love each other warmly, but at least let's have peace, or we are going to have problems. So I believe such partnerships are possible, even if the national framework or the general setup of rules is not always friendly to this dimension. Yeah, but it's a pragmatic fact, I think.
Thank you, Lucia. I'm sorry. There are a couple of people who are raising hands, and there's a question in the line. So I think I will gather the questions, and maybe you can all answer all together. And we can wrap up the discussion in 10 minutes, because we agreed that we're not going to go on for 2 hours. That was one thing that we agreed in the beginning, and I would like to finish the discussion in 10 minutes maximum. So there's a question from Zeynep from the chat, and she's asking because there has been an increasing number of the irregular migrants from countries like Iraq, Afghanistan. So putting a pressure, I wouldn't say big pressure on the EU borders, Zeynep. I would like to a bit disagree on that, but let's say pressure on the EU borders. So the question is, do you think that a possible new pact or extended version of the pact or should also cover the refugees from other countries? While answering that, could you please take into consideration, so what should be next? If we're talking about the deal to be renewed, could you please respond on what should be included? I think we can all agree that it has to be more acquis friendly. When I say acquis friendly, I mean, it has to be respecting the European Union acquis. So that's one thing I think we all agree. It should be more human rights-based approach, rights-based approach in terms of emergency needs or humanitarian response. So those are the things that we agree on. Is there anything that local governments are critical? We, I think, have come to the conclusion that local governments are very, very critical, and civil society organizations, not only the big ones, but small is beautiful. We should also focus on the small NGOs. And also there should be other mechanisms to distribute the aid, blockchain technology, whatever you call it. The world is a beautiful place when it comes to creativity. If we can have this Zoom meeting between Madrid, Brussels, Ankara, Istanbul, and Prague, I think we can come up with a way of a more creative distribution of aid. And then I will leave the floor to Otan afterwards. He's joining us from Oxford, and then Buket later on. Can we have a very quick round, 30 seconds? And Omar, sorry, I didn't forget you. And Omar is in the line. So can we have like a 30-second, like what would be the future of the deal? And would it include refugees other than Syrians? Shall I start with Deniz?
Yes, of course. Actually, whether it will include other people, most of the projects that are listed on the Commission website are already including vulnerable people. Actually, it also includes citizens of Turkey, as well as other asylum seekers and refugees and migrants. So I think in the next round, if there's going to be a next round, and we assume there will be, yes, they will be included.
Okay, thank you. And İlke?
My 30 seconds will be spent on what is next in the deal, separate tracks for separate issues on Turkey-EU relations, not mixing everything in a deal that is destined to be a failure 5 years after that.
Okay, thank you. That was very straightforward. Başak?
I also will start with what should not be in the deal. Commitments that the parties cannot fulfill not to further the issues of credible commitment that already exist. And I guess it links to İlke's point about linking it to too many things. Of course, the municipalities and local governance is important. And once again, not just employability focus, but also employment focus and sustainability focus is very important. And in terms of including other groups, already Turkey has demanded, the Foreign Ministry has demanded that other groups are more effectively included into the new deal. Currently, they are included as beneficiaries given a certain set of quotas, and for some projects they can be beneficiaries, for others they cannot. I'm not sure, but I think they want a larger focus on them as well.
Thank you, Başak. And Lucia?
I agree that not all issues should be put into a 2-page statement. At the same time, I do believe that the refugee deal and the accession partnership are inseparable. And I believe that the EU and Turkey should be working on both of them if they want to have a balance.
Thank you, Lucia. Othon, the floor is yours to ask your question. And yeah. Oh, I can't hear you, although you're on mute, which is strange. I don't understand it.
Maybe he can write, and maybe Omar or the next person.
Yeah, no, I think Buket was first. We will try again, Othon, but Buket, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. This is Buket from Assam. Many thanks for these valuable presentations. It was very open-minded and valuable contributions. I have a question. It's a general question. There are also some arguments stating that this EU-Turkey deal is feeding the, perception of sharing the responsibility is being replaced by transfer of responsibility in these refugee issues to Turkey, actually. So, this also has some implications in terms of among the Turkish community, that the negative view, prejudices, even the xenophobia, the hatred speech, anti-migrants speeches are increasing. Sometimes we see this in Turkish society as well. So I was wondering, do you think that this EU-Turkey deal and these increasing sometimes these negative perceptions against the migrants, the refugees in the society, also have some implications on social cohesion efforts? So what do you think that these, 3+3 billion, one-to-one type of all these very political, very financial terms are getting us very away from this right-based issue that you often highlighted during this speech? I was wondering the next steps, if there will be a new deal, will somehow cover this perspective, this dimension as well. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody who would like to respond to Buket's question? Deniz, maybe you would like to do that?
Well, yes. In the new deal, I mean, I totally agree that yes, there is like this issue of, you know, shifting the burden or transferring the burden. But although I hate this discussion or usage of the word burden when we are discussing this, because I mean, at the same time, I think it also neglects the fact that these people are adding a lot to the Turkish society as well. But I mean, I will sound very transactional here, but we don't have any better other solution, right? I mean, if you think about this one-to-one scheme, they promised 72,000 people to be resettled, and only more than 20,000 have been resettled. So I mean, it definitely is not working. I mean, nothing else seems to be working. So I cannot really come up with any other better solution at this point in time, unfortunately.
Okay. Any other comments on this, or shall I move to Omar's question? Okay, move to Omar's question then. Omar?
Thank you very much, Professor, and thank you for all of your presentations. I just want to say that today the German deputy government spokesperson praised Turkey for what it has been doing so far, and I think maybe this is setting the stage for revisiting the EU-Turkey deal, and perhaps this could be like the most serious signal so far that we received. But my question is at the micro level instead of the macro one, and it is basically directed to Professor Deniz and Başak Yavçan as well. We all agree, I guess, that the actors at the local level are very important, especially municipalities. And we've seen very high, or like we've seen discrepancy between municipalities that are very engaged with their policies with asylum seekers and refugees, or Syrians under temporary protection as well, and those who remain or sustain exclusionary policies. And recently I concluded a project that actually highlighted those three municipal approaches to toward refugees or asylum seekers, or let's call them Syrian under temporary protection, or even Afghans as well. And I've seen that it's not related to being of the same political color as much as it is related to the willingness to do so. And after 5 years, if we learned one thing, it is that hiding behind the lack of funds from the central government to actually sustain services at an equal part to both members of the hosting community and Syrians or Afghans or other populations is actually possible. But how can we, as academics or people who work on the policy aspect of this, how can we engage more with municipalities who sustaining this exclusionary approach toward other or like, let me say, non-Turks, whereas there are means available to navigate this hardship? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Omar. Omar has just, as he mentioned, that they've concluded a research, quite a comprehensive research, and the report is out from TEPAF, again, advertisement here. And also Omar gave a talk, which is also available on the METUMIR YouTube website, if you are interested in going into the details. The floor is open to answers, and who would like to take on the... Deniz is shaking hands, yes.
Başak can go on. She seems excited.
Yes, Başak, go ahead.
No, I was excited about Başak's promotion of the METUMIR website. We also have
not only METUMIR, we're promoting
EUTurkey is also another Twitter account that you can follow of TOBB University of Economics and Technology. No, I just wanted to actually I reflect on what Ömer has said. I completely agree with you. There are different, but I believe that instead of seeing this like as exclusionary versus inclusionary dichotomy, I think we should treat it like a continuous variable, and there are degrees of it. And I have, of course, clearly this is why actually we have written this article with Furia, showing that it's not just about whether or not you're the mayor is from the party of the government. It does change even within a party, and even a party that is expected to be immigrant can have inclusionary policies. I think first we should not categorize based on party politics, because local politics already is different. You know, sometimes it's pure coincidence that that mayor is from that party. It's where party politics play in. But I think there are even that a municipality that looks exclusionary does feel the pressure and does want its citizens to benefit from these projects, from this collaboration, and also share some of the costs of, let's say, garbage collection or transportation. You know, I mean, there is no way that a municipality can avoid these costs, and therefore they would be willing to have some collaboration. Maybe they wouldn't be doing cash for work projects for Syrians, but they could agree on other things. Maybe those that are more willing, like Seyhan or now Adana Metropolitan Municipality, could set up a women's cooperative, right? But these are good examples. They also encourage other municipalities, I think, and projects like Reslog, and this mutual learning is important because we hear a lot from municipalities that they've done it, we would like to do it too. Or the Social Democratic Municipalities Union is also one of these places where there is some exchange going on this issue. So there is this mutual learning that we should promote. And I think the best is to bring other municipalities to these reluctant municipalities to explain the benefits of this kind of collaboration and more entrepreneurial policy making and implementation.
I agree with Başak, and at the same time, I would say we should also start doing more individual level analysis. I mean, if, for example, Antep has been a pioneer in integration policies, I think Fatma Şahin definitely has a role there. I don't think it is only about party affiliation. I have a family member, actually my husband has this late uncle who has been a mayor of Hendek, Sakarya for such a long time. And I think the guy was any party that made him a candidate, he joined that party. So, I mean, local elections are, you know, might work out very differently in Turkey. So for that reason, I think an individual level of analysis would be very interesting, but that's, I mean, I don't know how to conduct that, but it would make, I think, very interesting outcomes.
And thank you all for joining and listening and being with us till the end. And thank you for the co-sponsors, the Hugo Observatory, EUTurkey, TOBB Migration Research, METUMIR, and Women for Foreign Policy. I would like to thank you all the panelists who joined us and brought us the insight and discuss from different angles. And these videos, as Başak just said, will be available. So if you missed any part of it, you can follow it from the video. Thank you.